Okay,
I have a Nietzsche quote that maybe you could tie into what you want to say. I don't want you to judge a book by how I use a quote. I would like you to read the afterword at minimum to my Time Energy book. I'll send it to you if you don't have a copy, but I do want you to talk about this quote, but how I use this quote, I just kind of want everyone to keep in mind. I'm not going to sit here and explain to you all how and why I use it, but I'd like to say I feel like I'm going beyond Lizardo, potentially Tut. I'm trying to do something different here. But a quote I find very powerful is that he says, if the need for and the refinement of a superior culture penetrates the working class, it can no longer do the work without suffering disproportionately. For that, a worker thus developed aspires to otium, leisure time, and does not ask for a lightening of labor, but for liberation from it, i.e., to impose its burden on another. Now, two things, because I'm about to read the rest of the quote. To impose its burden on another is to say, the working class has its burden, but it can impose that on someone else. And so let's turn to who else? He says, let's find the rest of the quote. One could perhaps, let's see. If the need for the refinement of superior culture penetrates where he's no longer do the work without suffering just by work. Okay, well, here's the rest of the quote. One could perhaps think of satisfying his desires and massively introducing barbaric Asian and African populations so that the civilized world continues to use the services of the uncivilized world, and thus non-culture would be considered precisely to be a sort of corvée. So and this is all in the context of him being concerned with the leveling effects that are making workers desire something more than just their work.
But he's not advocating this, is he? He's basically saying this could happen.
Well, he went to fight the levelers, right? He actually enlisted when he didn't have to go fight the levelers, and he was with the most, according to Lizardo, I don't know, but like the most reactionary.
There were no levelers in Nietzsche's lifetime. The levelers are from the 17th century.
Okay.
Lizardo likes doing this shit, though. He calls the 20th century the Napoleonic Wars.
Do you know, like, what war he went and fought in or whatever, like, off the top of your head?
Franco-Prussian War.
Okay, so that was not because
he never saw any fighting, and he got sick and got cashed out. And then he complained that maybe the fighting around the commune might end up destroying priceless works of art. And people are like, oh, he only cares about works of art. We should care about works of art, actually.
Yeah.
We definitely should.
Hot take.
I mean, Chris, like, this is what we always are kind of dealing with when Nietzsche comes up, is that there's certain people on the left who are basically saying, look, Nietzsche was an aristocrat, and he defended aristocracy. It's not like I like this idea maybe of a universal aristocracy, the idea that everybody has more time energy, everybody has more leisure, like, we're about time energy. But Nietzsche's presented by certain Marxists as okay, we're the noble aristocrats, we're the creative ones, we need the peasants over there to do the work. We don't want them getting culture. We don't want them having odium, so we can do our thing. And there's other readings of Nietzsche where Nietzsche is much more a champion of individual freedom and individual cultivation of one's self-creativity. And there's points in Nietzsche where I'm like, I get a universal thing from him where he's not just saying, the vast majority of people have to do shitty work and never engage in self-becoming, self-creation. I see this other aspect of Nietzsche that's much more of like a universal existentialist type, champion of individual freedom. And so I don't know, but this comes back to my question. Is it just that he's not as systematic as, say, like a philosopher on the level of Kant or,
Right. Okay, so maybe that brings us around to it because, there's the whole kind of bourgeois meritocracy, natural aristocracy idea, right? And, we know it from liberalism, like equality of opportunity, not of outcomes, right? And, so this is what I mean when I say Nietzsche's a liberal, meaning, he's like, yeah, maybe some people are not interested in doing philosophy and art. Maybe some people get their satisfaction out of repetitive labor, Now, so what's the point of all that? Because he's not painting a political picture. He's not giving a political vision. He's talking about a crisis, what he called the crisis of European civilization. And really the crisis of Christianity and its bourgeois aftermath. And, and capitalism, of course, right? So he does see capitalism as a kind of playing out of a kind of bourgeois humanism and a kind of Christianity, a kind of a slave morality that is, falsely preached to the subaltern, right? So the priests, so it's kind of like there are two targets of the slave morality. There's the aristocracy and there's the common people. And Nietzsche thinks that when the aristocracy gets slave morality, when the aristocracy gets Christianity, it's good because it's a self-overcoming, it's from a position of strength. Whereas if the subaltern embraced Christianity, it's inauthentic because it's actually not a self-overcoming. It's a kind of rationalization of one's condition. And it's resentment, right? So, is there something systematic in Nietzsche? So Nietzsche was taken up by the postmodernists as a kind of anti-metaphysical thinker. And here I'll just use a phrase of Robert Pippin. I don't think Kant or Hegel or Nietzsche or Marx are anti-metaphysical. I think they're post-metaphysical, which is different, meaning they have a different understanding of metaphysics, that non-traditional philosophical understanding of what metaphysics is really about. And for Nietzsche, metaphysics is, psychological. It's like a kind of will to power that's like inherent in biological life itself, and, which is a very peculiar way of putting it. Kant and Hegel and Marx have a more kind of social historical understanding of the origin of metaphysics. And there is a crisis of European metaphysics in the 19th century, in this time, in Nietzsche's time. And that's where he's getting his, last man over man idea. He's like, this form of life is in crisis. It's landing in nihilism. And that's not a bad thing. It's actually, something that tasks humanity, right? European humanity, right? Because, I think it would be arguable whether the entire world had landed in this metaphysical nihilism at the end of the 19th century. Maybe in 2024, the whole world has. But in Nietzsche's time, maybe not yet, right? The quotation, Dave, that you read sounds to me like a total setup in the sense of, it sounds like Nietzsche's arguing for the labor aristocracy in imperialism. That the Western workers should have their workload lightened, but it should be fobbed off on the workers of the third world or something. That the American working class has its standard of living boosted by the, real like slave-like exploitation of people in the colonial or post-colonial or neo-colonial world. That's what that sounds like. It sounds like, oh yeah, Nietzsche's seeing that and he is advocating it. And I just feel like, well, that would still like not really get at what Nietzsche's concern actually is, which is, and this is what Heidegger picks up on, by the way, from Nietzsche, which is that this Western metaphysics that's traceable all the way back to classical antiquity has been leading us to this place, right? Has been leading us to a kind of labor metaphysics and a kind of nihilistic dead end. And, historically, of course, that's not true. That's not even true for most of the bourgeois epoch. It's very true of the industrial capitalist epoch. And again, that's where Marxism would say, Nietzsche is describing something real, but he's misattributing it and he's putting it in the wrong historical frame. It's like Western civilization rather than like industrial capitalism. And so it would require a reinterpretation of what Nietzsche is talking about at a more fundamental level than just saying, oh, what does he say about the workers?